guys for coming to the Sea Dog Brewery here in Exeter. The one thing I will say is remember to take care of your bartender, Amanda, who's back there. She's working here. This is usually a closed area for tonight, and she opened it up just for us. So please make sure you take care of Amanda with when you pay your bar tab. So my name is Senator Tim Lang. We're here. We're members of the Beer Caucus. So the Beer Caucus started. The four of us, not Governor Christie, but the other four of us, we're all freshman legislators together in the New Hampshire House. And we ended up forming a beer caucus because we all served on different committees. And when bills were coming up, sometimes you can't read every bill out of 1,200 bills. So talking to the person that was on the committee that heard the public testimony is a good way to find out what a bill's all about and ask questions you might have. And so the four of us formed the beer caucus. Mike was on State and Veterans. Reed was on Commerce at the time. Howard was on Agriculture. And I was on Ways and Means, Taxes. And so we would get together and talk about bills from our various committees, and pretty soon it turned into about 30 to 45 legislators getting together over beer, talking about policy and what was heard before our voting. So that's how the Beer Caucus came about. And with that, I'm going to kick it off. So again, I'm Senator Tim Lang. I'm in my first term as a state senator. I did 3 terms in the New Hampshire House of Representatives. I'm the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. And because we're the Beer Caucus, the government got your beer, by the way, we always have these conversations. We started this in 2020 during COVID when you couldn't go knock on anybody's door without possibly having some problems. And so we started having these virtual sessions, and now this is our first hybrid session. And we just sit down over beer, talk politics. And so today, again, I'm Senator Tim Lang. I'm drinking a Sea Dog Owl's Head. How about you?
Owl's Head.
Owl's Head.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Senator Howard Brewer. As Tim said, we were freshman reps and we're freshman senators together. So we've kind of been walking the path together. And I live in Loudon along with my wife Heather here. We have a farm that we operate, and we deliver fresh produce and maple syrup to many of the stores in the area. And so that's kind of my real day job. The Senate and serving in the legislature has been a real pleasure, and it's been a great opportunity to meet, well, just the friendships that the four of us has created, and so we appreciate it. And I know we're running a little late, so I'll go along. As Tim said, the Beer Caucus, one of our things is we have a beer together. I am drinking the Sea Dog Stowage, Deep Stowage, and it's very good. I would recommend it to anybody that likes an IPA. And I will send it to Mike.
Thanks, Senator Pearl. Hopefully you can hear me. Mike Moffett, also of Loudon. I'm only a state rep. I'm not a senator, but I'm happy to be here. I chair the House Committee on State Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs. I used to be on Education, very busy committee. And so I'm happy to be here. We're going to keep this moving. I will tell you, I am drinking from this wonderful establishment a Blue Paw blueberry beer. It's got blueberries in it. Mrs. Panacity recommended it, and want to introduce her husband, the Honorable Reed Panacity, is in the house.
Thank you very much, Representative Moffett. Again, Reed Panacity. I'm a former state representative. I served a couple terms in the State House. I was also on Veterans Affairs in Commerce and ED&A. I am drinking tonight same thing as Howard's drinking, and that's the Deep Stowage. Yeah, he's the invader.
It's appropriate.
So I will turn it over to the guest of honor, and I have the privilege of introducing you to the governor of New Jersey and running for president of the United States.
Yeah! Thank you. Yeah. So, first thing is coming by the source. Are they going to be used?
I'll tell you in a minute what those are all about.
All right. Well, look, I'm not giving any speech at the Beer Caucus. I gotta say, that's definitely not worthy of this gathering. I would rather just answer the questions from the caucusers, and I know that they have a number of them prepared for me. I can tell by the papers they have in front of me. And I was also warned by a few of them last night that we're going to have a lightning round, which I must give short answers to. And so you got to tell any presidential candidate the answers have to be short when they have to be short. So I am ready to be interrogated by the Beer Caucus.
That's great. The swords are all about. So again, when we used to have the virtual ones, we would pull a sword out and start pulling it out of the scabbard, meaning time to cut your answer short. You're running on too long. So if you see Mike or Reed reaching for their swords,
That's it. I'll get the picture.
you'll get the idea. You're running on too long.
Cut to the chase.
So we're gonna go straight to Mike. Mike's got the first question of the evening.
Thanks, Senator Lang. My question, I said I chair state federal. We're having a crisis in terms of military recruiting. Everybody knows that. The Army, Representative Edwards' branch was 25% short of mission last year. It's a crisis many of us feel. So in a commencement address at Annapolis, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke to the new naval officers, and she mentioned that she saw climate change as a priority, quote unquote, a real threat to national security. Now that especially concerned me. I'm a retired Marine Corps officer, a former professor, among other things. And I was recently on a Zoom conference with some people, former Navy Department folks under Roy Mabus, who was the Navy, the head of the Navy Department under President Obama. And they went on and on about the need for the military to get green electric vehicles, and they were talking about biojet fuel and all this, and this on top of all the DEI social stuff that is now part of the military. So my question to you, Governor, when you become Commander-in-Chief, how much of a priority is fighting climate change going to be to you as Commander-in-Chief?
Not much. Look, I think that the military's job is to deter war, and if war cannot be deterred, to fight it and win it. And whatever they need to do in order to meet those priorities, that's what they should be doing. And it should have anything to do with a social agenda, whether it be DEI or whether it be climate change or any other social issue. They have a job to do. And I think recruitment is down for the reasons you're talking about. I don't think they see a clear mission anymore in the United States from the Commander-in-Chief. And I think they want a Commander-in-Chief they can be proud of, and that gives them a very clear view of what that mission should be. And I don't think that we need American men and women in uniform worrying about climate change. I think I want them worrying about how they can be best prepared to protect this country and to advocate for our positions all around the world militarily.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Governor. Senator Coral is on that. Go ahead, Senator.
Well, thank you, Governor, for coming here tonight. We love, one of the great things about New Hampshire is we get to have all of the presidential candidates come and really sit down and talk to us, and we appreciate that. And you see by the folks that are here, it's important to us, and you do very well campaigning. So we welcome you to New Hampshire. So my family came here in the late 1600s, 1660s, and we came here to seek a better life. We were immigrants ourselves at that time, and we've been in the agricultural world ever since. I still farm today. I'm the sixth generation of my family to farm in the town of Loudon, and we've been here for a long time. So one of the problems that we're having on a regular basis is labor. We're struggling to get enough workers. We're struggling to get anybody that even wants to show up and do a hard day's work. It's really a challenge now to find that. So part of immigration policy is to control immigration, which immigration, as we all know, probably is more of a national security issue than it is a job force issue, but it certainly can serve both purposes. And I guess I would like to hear your thoughts on, A, securing the border for our national security issues, but also your thoughts afterwards of how we take the immigration that's coming and what you would do with it to provide those workers that are so essential to us in agriculture and every other industry that here in the United States.
Well, let me start first with where you ended, and then I'll get to border security after that. But look, we have 6 million open jobs in this country right now. 6 million open jobs in this economy. And what that tells you is it tells me that those are jobs that Americans either can't do or don't want to do. And so we've had this happen over the course of our history. And when we do, we go around the world and permit folks who have those particular expertise to come in and to come into our country and do a good, hard day's work and get paid for it, pay taxes, learn the language, and become a part of this country. And with all of the problems at the southern border and all the rhetoric that's been used by other candidates in this race, immigration has become a dirty word. It's not. And if we don't start allowing people into this country in an organized, merit-based, legal way, we're going to fall further and further behind economically. And so I would go to a merit-based immigration system. Look, my great-grandfather came here in 1901, and he came here because he was a stonemason. And they were building New York City, and they needed masons to build those buildings. And he came here for that reason. And my grandfather was born in the boat between Sicily and the United States, and became an American citizen when he arrived in Ellis Island. So these are the great stories that this country has always been able to create, and we need people to be coming and wanting to continue to come here. That's what makes us different than other countries. Now on the border, I'm not someone who's in favor of shooting them stone cold dead when they come over the border. I think it's silly thing to say. TV tough guy talk. I'm someone who says there should be a plan of how to deal with the border, and to me, it's going to take some time, but we can do it. First day, I would sign an executive order to send National Guard to the border. Our Customs and Border Patrol officers are overwhelmed. 200,000 attempted illegal entries a month for the last 11 months. They're overwhelmed and they need help. That's what the National Guard is in part there for, to protect our country inside our borders. That's what they should be doing. Second, I'd hire 10,000 new Customs and Border Patrol officers, and it would take us about a year or more to train them and to deploy them. As you do that, you take the National Guard people out and replace them with Customs and Border Patrol officers. Third, we only have 38,000 detention beds at the border. 200,000 people a month try to come over. We need to double the number of detention beds to 80,000 so that we can detain people, determine their status, whether they can come into the country or not, and then send them back, not release them into the country. Because what's happening now is point 4. People come and claim asylum, they want to come over the border, and we say to them, your asylum hearing is in 4 years. Well, we can't detain them for 4 years, so we release them into the country and then say, come back to El Paso in 4 years and have a hearing to determine whether to kick you out of the country. There are very few people stupid enough to come back to El Paso after they've been released into the United States for 4 years. So I would triple the number of immigration judges and make sure that we get that from 4 years down below a year, so that we can detain them for that period of time legally, and either they come into the country because they've proven their asylum claim, or they don't, they get sent back directly. That's what I do to secure the border. And to change the immigration, we would go to merit-based immigration and e-verify for employers so they know that they're hiring someone who's here legally, and they can't take advantage of someone who's here illegally. But to do that, we're going to have to give the Democrats something, because they don't want legal merit-based immigration, and they don't want e-verify. So whether it's on path to citizenship or whether it's about dreamers, the next president, if they want to fix this problem, is going to have to find a way to compromise with the other side. I spent my whole career in New Jersey figuring out ways to do that and continue to accomplish conservative policies. That's what I do on immigration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's one other thing in New Hampshire, we have a northern border with Canada where we're seeing some illegal crossing issues ramping up in there. So I guess I would just remind you there's a northern border we need to secure as well.
I would, and look, the same activity that we're pursuing at the southern border should be pursued at the northern border in proportional respect. So we're not certainly having 200,000 people a month coming over the northern border illegally or attempting to. So we wouldn't need the same amount of resources, but we would need some to make sure we secure that from a national security perspective.
Thank you. I guess I'm throwing it to Reed.
Oh, me? Okay. I thought we were going to Tim. Maybe your grandfather was passed.
Could be.
On the same ship.
Might have been.
Never know. I'm retired military, retired Navy, so my question is going to be about the VA system. So nationally, there are roughly 16 to 18 million veterans in the United States. That's roughly 6% of our population. Here in New Hampshire in 22, there were 88,247 veterans. That's roughly 7%. So the VA Health Administration is the largest integrated healthcare network in the United States. with 1,255 healthcare facilities serving roughly 9 million enrolled veterans. The VA healthcare system faces significant challenges. We've seen it, we've heard about it, we've read about it in the papers, in the news, etc. Everything from inadequate healthcare being provided, issues with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, hearing loss, exposure to toxic environments, inadequate access to disability programs, and backlog of claims. My question to you, Governor, can you speak to some of these issues, and what would you do and your administration if you became Commander-in-Chief?
Well, look, I think the first thing is what I think we've shown over time is that the number of veterans we have has overwhelmed the capacity of the VA to provide them care in a timely fashion. And so we have two options. Do we expand the VA to a large enough size, build new facilities, and do all the rest to try to do that? Or do we go to an alternate plan, which would be to give every veteran, when they leave, an insurance card which says you can go and get health care wherever you want? I would favor the latter. I don't think it makes sense for us to expand the footprint of the Veterans Administration bigger than what it is now. I think it'll just become harder and harder to manage. Now, we need to improve what's happening in the VA because it's still a primary provider of care for so many of our veterans, and we don't want that to go away. But what we do want is for them, all these men and women who've been honorably discharged and have all these issues that you just mentioned and more, they need to be cared for in a way that honors their service. And it seems to me that it shouldn't matter where you live in this country as to how easy you can access health care as a veteran. And we know that in some states there are more VA facilities than others. And it makes it easier for them geographically and otherwise to do it. I think to take away that issue, what I would do is give each member of the military who's honorably discharged a card that permits them to go and get their health care at any doctor, any hospital they want, and the government will reimburse those hospitals and physicians for the care they give. Think about the rate of suicide among our veterans, and so many of it's because they're waiting in line to get mental health treatment at a VA, and they take their own life before they can get the help they need. That's unacceptable. It's unacceptable to me. It should be unacceptable to any American.
Well, right now, the current budget is $325+ billion a year. That's a significant amount of money. So that organization faces crisis, and the next person who can change that has to really look at that.
There's no doubt. And look, you have to have a VA administrator who's going to look at trying to spend that money in a way which actually gives the care to the veterans that they need. But what I am absolutely confident of is that if we give veterans access to private sector health care, that their treatment will be supplementing what they get at the VA, faster, more effective, and save lives.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Back to me now.
Senator Tim.
All right, so my question. We waved the magic wand, and you are now the President of the United States. First day in office, what are you doing? What's the most important thing that is going to put you front and center that you think needs such immediate action? It's the first action you take on the first day in office.
Well, I just gave it in the answer to that. We would sign the executive order on getting a National Guard to the border. I think you have to do that the first day. If we don't control that, we're putting ourselves at national security risk, and we're making an open invitation to our adversaries around the world to come and use the southern border to invade us. So that would be the first thing I would do.
And northern.
I understand. I heard, but I want to be really clear with you, okay? The first action is going to be on the southern, because we don't have 200,000 people a day, or a month rather, trying to illegally cross the northern border. So I need to get that one under control first. First day, yes. First month, yes, in the northern border. First day on the southern border. Secondly, I think the tone you set in your inaugural address is going to make a big, big difference in terms of where we go as a country from here. I'm tired of hearing all the negativity about this country. I'm tired of hearing about all the anger. It is exhausting the American people. And we need a president who, once again, is optimistic and hopeful and inspirational. I don't need to sit through another inaugural speech about, American carnage. I don't need to sit through another inaugural speech which looks backwards and not forwards. We need to have a president who's going to look forward and be inspirational. And I think the most important two things I could do on the first day is to sign that executive order to provide security to the southern border, and then secondly, give a speech that tells the American people, both in tone and substance, that we are now moving ahead. We're a country of the future, not a country dwelling on the past.
Hey, ladies, again, today I heard in the news 12,000 was the interdiction rate, the highest ever for a single day today on the southern border. 12,000 interdictions today. So just as a quick follow-up to that, so Governor Sununu went down to Washington, D.C. and asked for basically authority to deputize some of our northern law enforcement people, our state police, our county officials, local officials, to help with the border in the northern, because the federal government have pulled back agents from our northern border. Would that be a policy you would encourage, is to allow states to encourage? We put, we ended up adding $1.4 million to the Northern Border Alliance program to fund local law enforcement, state law enforcement, county law enforcement to help federal officials with interdiction. But when we went to ask to get the law enforcement permission that was necessary to encourage, we were told no. Would you support that?
Yeah, I would. In fact, when I was U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, before my successor as governor turned this into a sanctuary state, I worked with the state at that time, and to be fair, with the Democratic governor at that time, to deputize our county sheriff's officers and our local police officers to make arrests regarding immigration. It is permitted under federal law. There's a statute that permits it. You just need the permission of the Attorney General of the United States to do that, and my Attorney General would give that permission. We used it responsibly to fight crime in New Jersey as state and local partners, and with the federal partners that I represented really effectively back in the early 2000s. And it was abandoned, quite frankly, both by the Trump administration and the Biden administration. It was a wrong decision, and I would bring that back. We need as many people on the front lines of this fight as we can have, and I trust local police officers and county police officers to responsibly make those decisions, and so I would definitely permit that.
Thank you very much. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Senator. I have a question on marijuana legalization. New Hampshire is surrounded by states in a province of Quebec where it is legal. I'm going to sit on that question, because we'll come back to it if we have time. It can marinate and percolate, whatever the word is. Because there's some news out of Colorado, which you probably have heard, and that's what I really want to ask you while I have time, and we'll come back to that if we can. The Supreme Court situation, the state Supreme Court in Colorado is taking Donald Trump off the ballot out there. There was a movement here to do that. It didn't move forward. But I will come back to marijuana, but I really want to ask you, what are your thoughts? This will probably go to the U.S. Supreme Court on Trump being removed from the ballot in Colorado and perhaps elsewhere.
Look, it will go to the U.S. Supreme Court. There's no chance it won't. Look, I think we should beat Donald Trump at the ballot box, not in the courtroom. And I don't think that it will end this era, which I think needs to end in our country of Donald Trump, by courts doing it. I think it will just cause more unrest and anger and bitterness in this country if we do it that way. I've now reviewed the opinion. There are arguments to be made on both sides of it from a legal perspective. But frankly, for the good of the country, I think the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, should overturn the decision and return the decision to the voters and let the voters decide. I'm on record of what I think about his conduct, both on Election Day 2020 and in all the days after that till he left office, and what he's done since then. But I still believe that in this country, the voters get to decide who their president is, and I think it's the wrong move to remove him from the ballot for those reasons, because he hasn't been convicted of insurrection, hasn't been charged with it. And while I read the opinion and I understand the arguments, I disagree.
Thank you, sir. Senator Pearl.
Thank you again. So, in New Hampshire and all across the country, we're seeing the degradation of families, and we're seeing an awful lot of single-parent households that are coming to be the way children are being raised. In New Hampshire, we're having many discussions about parental rights and things that are associated with the family. And so my question to you is, as we see this occur, in fact, I was talking with our bartender Amanda earlier about being a single parent and having the responsibility of children in school and taking care of a family. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on what you would do as president for helping these families with the pertinent issues that are in there every day. They're in a struggle of trying to be out there and work hard and make the money they need to take care of the family as a single parent, yet they want to have the opportunities for, they need childcare, they want the opportunities for a higher education, a degree, that can help them move forward and do a better job with earning the money that they need to take care of their household. So I guess I'd like to know what your thoughts are and what your vision would be for the federal government's role in helping these families out as we, as they continue with the struggle.
Well, I was talking a bit about this morning at a substance abuse treatment center. And, look, we need to deal with the reality of what family life looks like in America right now. And it's very different than when you and I grew up.
Yes.
And the challenges are really different. And so what I would do is establish an all families block grant program at the federal level that says we're going to give you a block grant every year from the federal government to each state, and say to them, this money must be used to try to improve the lives and futures of families in your state. And I wouldn't let the federal government make the decision about where the money goes beyond that, because they would invariably screw it up. The governors are in a much better position in the state legislatures to make that call. And so that's a place where you could say, in your particular state, child care is underfunded and needs to be helped. You could use that money for that. If it's about educational opportunities to be provided for families to help, whether it's trade school, community college, or four-year college, to help supplement the cost of that, or lower the cost if it's a state institution. You can use the money for that. But all of it should be going towards trying to improve the lot of families that are under pressure in your state. And each state will know what type of families those are in their state and where the needs are much better than the federal government will. But we can provide the finances for it so that governors like Governor Sununu can make those decisions here in his own state in a way that will best utilize the money, rather than have the feds nitpick every one of these things, give money in some states where it's really not needed, and shortchange other areas where the state could really use help.
So you'd be in favor of block grants? Would that be a similar approach, perhaps, to Medicaid in the way that we handle our health care in the state?
Absolutely. Look, having been a governor, I recognize how the strings that are attached to federal money just tie in knots and make you make decisions that you otherwise wouldn't want to make because they're driven by the money. I think governors should make these decisions, and their state legislatures. That's why they're elected. That's why they come from our communities, and they're much better at making those decisions than folks in Washington, D.C., who are hundreds, if not thousands of miles away in some instances, and don't have the connection with the community to be able to make the decision in the right way.
Thank you. Reed?
Thank you very much. Great answers, but I'm going to change it up a little bit, just a little bit. I can ask you questions on China and Russia and all that. We've heard the answers before, and we'll hear them for the next month or so.
Yep.
Okay, but I want to go something deeper. What do you do for relaxation?
Well, a few things. I love to read. I love to watch sports, both in person and on television. And I love to listen to music. And those are probably the three things that I do the most for relaxation.
All right, what kind of music?
Well, I'm from New Jersey.
Bruce?
So we have to start with Springsteen, of course, and then we move from there. And look, Bruce and I have had a complicated relationship over the last couple of decades. because while we agree very much on music and how great a state New Jersey is, we don't often, if ever, agree on politics. And so that's caused him at times to write letters to the editor about me, to local newspapers and other things. But we're in a good stretch of our relationship right now. But yeah, we start with Springsteen as New Jerseyans. That's a requirement. And then or Sinatra, and then you move from there.
All right, one more question, just to follow up. What's the last book you read? If you're a reader?
Yeah, the last book I read was a great book on Ulysses S. Grant. And I carried that thing around. It's about 900 pages. And I was carrying it around everywhere I was traveling, and I finally said to Mary Pat, like, I am finishing this book on the trip I was going on because I can't bear carrying it any longer. But it was a great book, and anybody who is interested in that era of our history, I'll just give you one vignette from Ulysses S. Grant. He was the paymaster. He went to West Point. He was the paymaster, and there was missing money. And Grant did not take the money, but he knew who did, and he knew that that person had a family emergency that they used the money to tend to. So he didn't turn the person in, and he took the hit himself, and he was dismissed from the Army, pre-Civil War. Now had no job, no place to go. He went back to his father's tanning store. He was a leather tanning goods salesman. He worked behind the desk, managed by his younger brother. Was not making enough money, and Ulysses S. Grant was selling firewood on the corner of the town he lived in Ohio, and then later became President of the United States. And arguably one of the greatest generals in the history of the United States military. So I learned a lot about Ulysses S. Grant, not just that he won the Civil War and drank too much. There's a lot more to his story than that. And so if you're interested in that stuff, that book was really great.
So you're saying you can be a governor and be president of the United States?
Yeah, if you're selling firewood on the corner and get there, I look like a real step up from there. Only hope I can do as well as Grant once I get there.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So, First in the Nation here in New Hampshire, I'm happy you're participating. We have some people in this race that are not participating in New Hampshire as much as they probably should. And so, I'm always amazed by First in the Nation stories. So, I know my First in the Nation stories. I grew up here in New Hampshire. My mom used to work at the Hampshire Highway Hotel down in Concord. And in 1976, I believe it was, my father got a phone call saying, get the kids, come down to the Hampshire Highway Hotel. Ronald Reagan is here. And so, you know, my first introduction to First in the Nation was when I was in middle school, getting to meet then Governor Reagan, former Governor Reagan from California.
Yep.
So what's your favorite First in the Nation story? You've done it twice now. You got 2016 and now you've got now. So what moment stands out in your mind as a First in the Nation story?
Well, I'll give you a story that was much more prevalent in 16 than it is this time in 24. In 16, there were a lot of us, as you'll remember. And by the time we got to New Hampshire, there were 13 of us still on the ballot. Much, much bigger field than the 5 or so that would probably be on the ballot this time. So when you would run into people in New Hampshire, I felt like you had all been trained from grade school to tell a presidential candidate the same thing. Really enjoyed your talk. You're in my top 3. Now, when it was 13 people, that was really somewhat encouraging. And I rode that for a long time, you know, and said the top 3. And finally, I was having lunch for the 3rd time with a former Speaker of the New Hampshire House, attempting to get the endorsement from that former Speaker. And this was the 3rd time that I had a meal with the former Speaker. And at the end of it, I looked over and said, so, look, we're about 6 weeks away from the primary. We spent a lot of time together. I really want to know kind of where you stand. The response I got back was, you're in my top 3. And I said, look, I don't know if you know this, but you can't vote for 3. You only have to vote for 1, and I have to tell you the truth. I'm really tired of having meals with you, and I can tell me you're in the top 3. So you know what? Whether the answer is yes or no, I want the answer now. And this former speaker looked across at me and said, I was waiting for you to grow impatient. The answer is yes. And I got the endorsement. But it is symbolic of what it's like to campaign up here. You have to gain a touch of when to ask for the endorsement, when not, when to push and when to just let things happen naturally. And, you know, the general rule of having to meet someone at least 3 times before they tell you that personally, eye to eye, before they tell you that you're going to get their vote. So it is a completely different style of campaigning that I dealt with when running for governor of New Jersey, where we have 9.3 million people. And so the idea of anybody getting to see me once during a campaign, let alone getting to see me 3 times, it was foreign to my experience. So New Hampshire has taught me that very well, and I'm glad to have finally got that endorsement. Didn't help me win the primary, but at least it wasn't wasted 3 meals, at least.
Well, Governor, you know in New Hampshire that politics is a sport. You know, that's something that we look forward to.
Yes.
And sometimes a blood sport.
Yes.
I'm familiar with that, too.
So, Governor, I will tell you you're in my top 2. So just
Tim, thank you. Given that there's really like 3 of us left, I can't tell you how warm my heart is to that, Tim, but I'm going to hang in there. There's still 4.5 weeks to go.
So I'm going to bring it back to one more political question. So we were talking with Senator Pearl about block grants. So I serve on the Senate Education Committee, and I know that nationwide we're starting to see some states saying maybe no to federal money when it comes to education because of the strings that are attached. Would you extend that block grant kind of idea, again, federal money from about education to the states to allow them to spend it where they think education money needs to be spent without the strings attached?
I would do something even broader than that. I would eliminate the Department of Education completely. We spend about $80 billion a year through the Federal Department of Education. I would eliminate it, and I would send that money proportionally to states who permitted for school choice and have fund school choice programs. I think that we need competition with our public schools. I think we should have that competition regardless of the financial wherewithal of the people who want to make that choice. And I think that using federal money in that way would encourage states to put school choice programs into place. And if they put it into place, we would help fund it with federal money that we used to send with all kinds of strings attached. So even better than a block grant, we will fund students directly and their families so that they can then make a choice about where best they can get their education. And I think that would be an important step when you think about the fact that in the latest test scores, 39% of our 8th graders don't read at grade level, and 25% of our 8th graders don't do math at grade level. We have a crisis in this country that's not being solved by the public education system at this point, and we need to supplement it with charter schools, Renaissance schools, and parents having choice. And I believe if public schools face competition, they'll up their game, like anybody else does who wants to try to preserve their job and their business.
So let's finish on that question. So I just came back from the Richard Nixon Presidential Library.
Been there.
And he had a great quote. He said that anybody who holds a school monopoly, it's neither good for the child nor the country. And I thought that was a great quote that I read.
He was right. That was a pretty great place, wasn't it?
Phenomenal
place. If you're
I'm
out there, you
looking
should
forward to being at yours.
Excellent. You'll have to come to New Jersey, so be ready.
Nixon has been here in the past. I know the clock is ticking, and so I'm going to look, Todd, when you're ready, give us a lightning round. But I did a couple things real quick. Great book, I read it, great book. Stories of the primary, don't have time to go there. I have a Nelson Rockefeller story from '64 in Grofton. I was very young.
Damn, you're old.
We don't have time for that. And a Ted Kennedy story from 1980. Members of the media, you can see me afterwards for that one. But Governor, I teased the marijuana question before, so I know there are many people out that having teased that, they want to know where you are in that.
I vetoed legalization of recreational marijuana when I was governor of New Jersey twice. If I were still there, I would veto it again. I do not believe, given the substance abuse issues that we have in this country, that we need to be giving permission to more drugs being used in our country. I think it's wrong. And I would, as president, I would keep it as a scheduled drug and would work hard to try to push back on states that have legalized it. Since I left, my state has legalized it. And I can tell you, all the promises they make about it, oh, it'll create jobs and opportunity. Look, most, if not almost every one of our suburban towns have passed ordinances not permitting marijuana shops to be in their town. So what's happening? The drug stores are going to all the big cities. And they're exposing young people in those cities to now being able to buy drugs legally. I think it's wrong.
Thank you. I hear you and I agree. Did you get a high sign? One more? One more. Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go back to the conversation we were having a little bit about your actions as president in the country. So we talked about the military. I'm worried about how you can unwind Bidenomics, whatever they call it. Right? That has been a disaster as far as I'm concerned for our country, with high inflation, high interest rates, the cost of goods going through the roof. So what do you do to unwind that? How do you act and move to get our country back on a balanced playing field when it comes to finances?
Well, the first thing you do is you return our budget to pre-COVID spending. We have a $1.7 trillion deficit this year. If we just return to pre-COVID spending, that would cut $1 trillion off of this year's deficit. We still have a $700 billion deficit, which is much too much, but that's the first place to start. Second, I would go to zero-based budgeting. I did this in New Jersey when we had an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget when I came into office. And everybody thought I was going to have to raise taxes in what's already one of the highest tax states in the country. And I said no. And what zero-based budgeting is instead of each department saying, this is what I spent last year, how much more do I get this year? They come in and start at zero. They have to justify every program to me. This took me 3 meetings a week of 6 hours per meeting for 6 weeks to go through the entire budget, but I did. And we eliminated 832 individual programs in 1 year, and it balanced our budget. Now, it also took my popularity from 55% to 38% because every program had a constituency that they liked. But I want to remind everybody, I had a Democratic legislature. I got the Democratic legislature to vote for that budget that eliminated 832 programs. So we'll tell you that they knew it was necessary. We have to bring the same discipline to Washington. If we do, we will bring interest rates down because we'll be borrowing less. Once interest rates come down, inflation comes down as well. People will be able to afford more of what they want to buy. We'll be able to afford to borrow money to buy a house, afford to borrow money to buy a car. And the second thing I would do on Bidenomics is to really open up energy production again in a way that's been slowed down by the Biden administration. Because we know that when oil prices are high, as they are now, it affects everything. It's not just heating your house and driving your car, but it's the trucks that drive the food to the supermarket. It's the trucks and the trains that get the furniture to the furniture stores, the clothes to the department stores. It increases the price of everything. Lower the price of energy, you will lower the price of everything at the same time. And that's the thing that can happen like that, because the energy market is a futures market. So if you announce that you are allowing the production of significantly more oil, well then the futures will trade down immediately because they'll know that the supply is coming and that prices should go down because of that. That's something that can lower inflation pretty quickly.
Excellent. That's it. You have one more thing, or then we're going to wrap up here. I think we're done.
I'm braced for the lightning round, but where's Todd?
Lightning round in 2 minutes. Yeah.
Let's do the lightning round.
Okay, lightning round.
Todd, I need to do the lightning round. I'm feeling challenged by the lightning round. I want to do it.
The lightning round, and Governor, thank you for being here.
My pleasure, guys.
Only in New Hampshire do you have beer with legislators with swords, so we did not have to deploy our swords. So thank you.
See,
for that.
that's good.
Great job.
That's what we're holding this.
We're going to have more beer before the lightning round.
We're holding this to get to know you. That's the idea.
Thank you,
Really
Reed.
your politics. What we
Also-
want you to do.
That's more important.
Also, Governor, you're very fortunate. We looked at our 2020 lightning round questions, and we got rid of most of those.
Excellent.
Out of respect.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we'll start with Giants or Jets?
Neither. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan.
For the record, he said cowboy fan, and let the word go forth, as JFK said. Who's after me?
All right, so you touched on this briefly. Springsteen or Bon Jovi?
Springsteen.
Reed?
He already answered 3 of my questions.
I'm sorry.
But I've got one. Do you like to drive or do you like to be driven?
I like to drive. I like to drive.
On your turnpikes? New
Turnpike,
York City?
Parkway, wherever I need to go, I like to
New York
drive.
City?
And you know what? It's never pleasant. But the only thing less pleasant is feeling like someone else is in control of deciding how you're going to avoid traffic, and you don't want that. So I'd rather be in control and make my own mistakes. Then I can only be mad at myself, not somebody who's driving me.
All right.
And this is no commentary on my wife's driving. Hers is excellent.
All right, so we'll give you 2 minutes. Make your pitch to the voters. You're here. You got a minute. Make your pitch, man. Take 2 minutes.
We're not done with the lightning round.
He's got to go.
Mike's got it down.
No, go ahead. Lightning round, go.
Well, Frankie Valli or Frankie Sinatra?
Oh, Sinatra. Look, Valley, who I've met, I never got to meet Sinatra. Valley, who I met, is a pretty cool guy. Very small, but pretty cool guy. But Sinatra, if you're a New Jersey guy, you would have wanted to have a chance to meet Frank Sinatra. So.
All right, Governor, this one's going to be probably the most important.
All right.
Your answer. Imitation maple syrup or real pure New Hampshire maple syrup? That's a tough one.
Wait a second, let me ask you a question.
We do not do
Do they make imitation maple syrup? I don't even know about that.
Well, not New Hampshire.
No.
It's Vermont syrup.
I will take New Hampshire maple syrup over Bernie Sanders maple syrup every day of the week. Every day of the week.
So again, Governor, make your pitch for your last one. You have 2 minutes. Go
Look,
ahead.
you've got less than 5 weeks to go, and the future of our country is at stake. I'm running in this race because I'm fighting for the soul of our country, not just the soul of our party, which I think is also at stake, but the soul of our country. You know, who do we want to be and how do we want to be represented, both here at home and around the world? Do we have someone who loves this country and puts the citizens of the country first? Or someone who puts their own self-interest first? The fact is, we've had, I think, 3 presidents in a row now who have put their own self-interest ahead of the interests of the country. Like Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden have all put their own personal interests ahead of the interests of this country. And I think that's why we have such an angry country. A country that feels like government gets nothing done anymore. Because when you do that, when you put your personal political interests ahead of the interests of the country, you don't compromise. You don't look for a way to solve problems. You just look for your next fundraising email that you could say you were angry and yelled and stopped something. I'm someone who believes that government can get things done, needs to get things done, and you need someone who's actually done that before and done it in a difficult circumstance. Remember, in New Jersey, 1 million more Democrats than Republicans, and we haven't elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 51 years. It's the longest streak of any state in America not to elect a Republican. And in that atmosphere, we eliminated the estate tax. In that atmosphere, we reformed pensions and made people pay in the public sector more for their health benefits so the taxpayers have to pay less. In that situation, we eliminated the scourge of crime in cities like Camden by firing the entire police department and hiring a new one that was going to be focused on public safety and not on union rules. And we stood up to the education establishment. We did all that with a backdrop of a Democrat state. That is what prepares you to go to Washington, D.C. and deal with the tumult and the anger that's down there. You need someone who's tested and who's ready. I've been tested, I am ready, and I'm ready to be President of the United States, and I hope that I get your support on January 23rd.
Thank you, Governor. Beer caucus members for coming. Just know as a beer caucus rule, you can't leave the room until you finish your beer. So just make sure you finish that, take care of that, and I think the governor's going to be around for a couple minutes to say hello.
And Senator Lang, if the governor wants to become president of the beer caucus, how does that work?
Oh, right. So to be president of the beer caucus, you got to buy a round. That's it. Just buy a round of beer.
That's it? And I become president?
Yeah, just know we've had 3 presidents one night before.
No term limits. There are no term limits.
Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity. Senator.